In this video, we're going to be completing our profiles app. So we're going to go ahead into our templates and open up our profile template. We're then going to load in our static files. So you remember we need to load the static files anywhere that we're trying to access the content within the static folder. So we'll then give it a block title. I'm just going to call this one profile. And I'm also going to give it the profile.user.username so that it displays which user's profile we're viewing. We'll then close our block tag and open our block content. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a div with a class of container. We'll give that some padding for as well. We're going to create a new div, and this is going to be our profile. Inside the profile div, we're then going to have a div with a class of info. So this is going to be what's down the left hand side with our images and that sort of stuff. So the first thing that we want to do here is we want to create a container for our profile image. We'll give that a class of profile image, and we'll also give it the text center class. So inside here, we are going to need an if statement. So basically what's going to happen is if we create an image tag and we try and load our image, if the user doesn't already have an image attached to it, it's going to crash the application. So we need to handle what happens if they don't have one. So we'll go ahead and create an if statement, and we'll say if profile.image.url is not none, then we're going to create an image tag. We'll give that a source attribute, and that's going to be our profile image URL. And we'll give it an alt tag, and I'm going to say that this is the profile.user.username and an S with profile image. So if we're looking at my profile, for example, that's going to say Daisy M's profile image. So we'll then close off that, and then we're going to go into our else block. So if we don't have a profile image, then we're going to load an image. It's going to load our static folder, and we need to go off and get an image. So I think if we go over to UX Wing again, where we got our icons last time, we can copy out the no image SVG. So if you just download that and drop it into the folder, we'll use this. So find it in the downloads. We will drop that into our static icons folder, and then we can give the path of /icons/no photography icon.svg. Okay, and we will give this one an alt of image not found icon. And finally, we will close off our if statement. So that is our image. So the next thing we want to do then is we want to open up a heading level 1. And in here, we're going to give the profile.user.username so that it displays the user's name. We'll then go ahead and create a p tag. I'm going to go ahead and add a strong tag in here as well, just to give this text a bit of emphasis. So I'm going to say joined Now, what I want to do here is I want to take the date that the user joined the application. So the date underscore joined is a field on the user model. The only thing is it's a date time field, so we want to do a little bit of formatting on it just so that it only displays the date. So we'll go ahead and load in the profile.user.date joined. Okay, so that will now give us access to that date time object. Now, using the pipe character, we're going to say here date, and then we're able to actually specify the formatting. Okay, so I'm going to use a lowercase d, an uppercase m, and an uppercase y. So the lowercase d will give us the actual number of the date, so whether it's the 7th, 10, would be 0710. The uppercase M is going to give us the month, and uppercase Y is going to give us the full year. So the full month obviously is going to be actual text, whereas if we used lowercase, we'd get 11 for November and such. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to copy that syntax. We'll have our P and our strong, and we're going to say recipes. Now, we haven't sent the recipes back in the context, I'm sure you'll remember from the views. So currently the only thing that we've sent back is the actual profile object. So we don't actually need to send our recipes back in the context, because you remember we created a related name of recipe owner on the recipe model. So that is linked to the user. The profile is also linked to the user. So from the profile object that we sent back, we can actually get the user, and then we can access the related name to find out how many recipes they have. And so in order to do this, we will say profile.user. Okay, so our profile object, then we're saying get the user, then we're going to use the recipe owner related name to get into our recipes, and then we can do count. That will give us the total number of recipes that the user has created. The next thing that we're going to do then is we're going to load the profile bio. So that will be profile.bio, and because it's the rich text field, we need to render safe so that our text loads in and doesn't have all that HTML formatting. Now, in earlier videos, I had actually been putting a paragraph tag around this. I wasn't really thinking. When we load this, it actually loads with the paragraph tag around it. So what will happen is if we actually put a paragraph tag around this now, if you try and validate your code in the HTML validator, you will have p tags inside p tags, and it will throw an error. So we don't need to do that, and it will just be on its own line anyway. So the next thing that we want to do here is we want to create a new div, so it needs to be within the profile. So we'll call this one profile recipes class, and inside here we're going to create a h2 with a class of text center and some padding bottom of 4. So we'll say latest recipes. We're now going to use a similar thing that we did above to get the recipe owner count, but to actually get the recipes and loop through the recipes. So we will start our for loop, and we're going to say for recipe in profile.user.recipe owner.all. So again, this is going to access our profile object. It's going to check the user and get the user object. Then it's going to use that related name of recipe owner to go off and get all of the recipes, and that enables us to loop through them without sending them back in the context. So we'll then create an anchor tag for each of those, and we will give this one our URL of recipe detail, so that when people click on them directly from their profile, they can go off and view them. So we can also then provide the recipe ID. So inside the anchor, we're going to add a H3 and we're going to put in the recipe title. And just underneath the anchor, we will add our recipe posted date. We'll then add a horizontal rule and end our for loop. We'll open up our run server now. It's going to look terrible because we haven't styled it yet, but we just want to make sure that all of that information is on the page. So we'll log in. And go to our profile. So our image is displaying. You can see our joined date. We have the number of recipes. Okay, so we just have a none value here because there's no profile yet, so there's no bio, so obviously we don't want none actually appearing on the page, so we'll go ahead into our code and handle that. So we'll add an if statement around the profile's bio, and we'll say if profile.bio is not none, and then we will close off our if statement. So then this just won't load if it doesn't exist yet. So if we go ahead and just check back and refresh that, it should be gone. Perfect. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to make our form. So we need to add in some context. So we're going to go back to our views.py, and within our context we're going to want to send back the actual form. So we've already imported the profile form, so just underneath the profile we're going to say we want to send back something called form, and it's going to be a profile form. So this will instantiate a form object, and we'll be able to view that on the front end. But the only thing is, because this is going to be our edit form, we want that to be pre-populated with the data that we already have. So what we can do with this is we can give it an instance. So because we already know the profile information, because we've got this up here, when we say instance equals profile, it will instantiate the form with the details of that profile already in it. So that will make it a little bit easier so that the user can see what's already in there when they're editing the form. So we'll go ahead now back to our profile, and we're going to add in the edit profile stuff. So I think if we do under the bio, we'll do an if statement here. So we can say if request.user is the profile.user, then we want to show them a button, and we'll give the ID of my VTN. Oops. We'll give it a class of our usual styling, so BTN, BTN primary, and our W25. We'll also give it a margin bottom of 4, and this is just going to say edit, and then we will close off that if statement. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to go over to W3 Schools, and I'm going to use this modal. So I will leave the link to this in the project's README file, so that you can copy it over. So we've already created the button. So what we need to do is we need to create the actual modal. So we'll copy this code across. and we're going to put that into the bottom of our file. Okay, so just indent that a little bit. So I'm going to give this a little bit of additional styling because we need to change it for what we need. So we're going to give it some margin top with our MT5 class. We have the modal content, which I'm also going to give a container class to. We're going to give this a font size of 1 and some padding end of 2, just to make it a little bit bigger, as the button's a little bit small otherwise. So we'll take out this paragraph and we're going to replace this with a form. So we're going to give it a method of post because we are posting to our update view. We're going to give it an action, and that is going to be our URL of our edit profile. And then we're going to pass in the request.user.id because you remember we need to pass that back over the URL parameter. So we're then going to give it a class, and we're going to give it a margin bottom of 2 and some padding of 2. So the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to give it the encode type. So if you remember, we discussed earlier, our files will not actually make it to Cloudinary unless we specify an encode type so that it knows that we are actually sending files as part of the form. Inside the form then, I'm going to add a H2 and I'm going to say edit profile. We might give this a class of text center just to keep with the styling that we have everywhere else, and I'm just going to give it an FS4, so that's font size 4. We then need to load in our cross-site request forgery token, and we're going to load our form, and we're going to load it as our crispy form. And we're going to load in the form media, and then we're going to create a div for the button with deflex and justify content center. We will then create our button with a type of submit. We will give it a class of our usual ones, BTN, BTN primary, and W25. And this is going to say edit. So we'll switch back now to the W3 Schools example, and we're going to copy across their JavaScript. So before we can use our JavaScript in here, we're just going to go into our base template and we're going to add a new block tag down at the bottom. So ensure that this is within the body tag or it won't work. So we're going to say block extra JS, and we'll close our block tag. Now, the only reason I'm making this block tag is because I'm going to have some toasts later on, and in order for those pop-ups to work on all pages, we'll need to add JavaScript into this tag. So on our child pages, we want to load both what's in the base and extra. So if we put it between the tag, then we can pick and choose whether we want both to load or just our child one. So we'll go ahead and open that, and we will say, block extra JS. We can then close our block tag, and inside here we're going to use block.super. So what block.super does is it says, I want you to go out and get like the parent tag, which is, you know, the one in our base.html, and I want you to load everything that's within those tags and then we can also use our own. Now, if I didn't define block.super, this would override what is in the parent tags in the base.html, and it would only load ours. So, I mean, sometimes you might want to do that if there's a page that just doesn't need it, but you would still like to keep everything else on, that's fine. So we'll go ahead now and create our script tags, and we'll paste in that bit of code. So I'm just going to change the var keywords to const because I can't stand looking at them. So var is kind of outdated and just we don't use them anymore. So the last thing we need to do to get this working is we need to go ahead into our urls.py. So although we created the edit profile yesterday, we didn't actually create the path for it. So we'll create that path now, and that is going to be edit followed by our slug, which will be our primary key, and then we will pass in our edit profile as view. We'll then give it a name, and that's going to be edit profile. So if we switch back to our live site now, we should be able to get to our profile, and when we click this, our modal pops up. So we'll just test that out. Put something random in here. Ooh, that's not what we want to see. That looks like a typo. That should be profile. So we'll just quickly correct that in our views. And we'll go into the views and we'll switch that for profiles. And we'll go back and attempt to do that again. So we'll just update that. So we can see that it did actually update, but we just went back to the wrong profiles. That's working perfect now. I did apologise for the typos. When you work full time and you have 4 kids, your brain doesn't always work perfectly. So we'll switch back to our code now, and we'll just go ahead and finish this off with our styling. So we'll open up our base.css file, and we're going to create a few new styles here. So the first one is we're going to target our profile image. We're going to give that a width of 280 pixels. We're going to give it a margin 0 auto to center it. We'll then target the actual profile image itself. So we'll say profile image, and we'll give this a border radius of 8 pixels and a width of 100% so that it takes up the full width of our parent container. We'll then target our actual profile container. We will give this one display flex. We'll give it a flex direction of column, and we will also justify the content to the center. We're going to target our info container, which contains like our image and all of our profile information. We're going to give that a width of 100% and text align center. And then lastly, we will target the profile recipes. So we'll give that a width of 100% as well. So we're going to need to add in a couple of media queries here just to ensure that everything loads in correctly. So we'll go ahead now under our last media query, and we will target the profile, and we'll say this one can then change direction. So on our desktop we want it to be a row. Then we will also target our info, and that one we're going to give a width of 30% to, just because it doesn't need to take up as much space as the recipes. So we'll then target the profile recipes, and we're going to say this can take the remaining 70% of the width, and then we will give it a padding of 1.5 rem and 3 rem, so that's shorthand 1.5 on the top and bottom and 3 to the left and right. And finally we will just target the profile recipes and take the text decoration off the anchor. So we'll go on ahead back over to our website, and everything seems to be loading okay now. So that is the conclusion of our profile app. In the next video we will begin getting started on the meal planner app.